Hey everybody, it is Wintermute coming to you from the think tank, and I am going to be doing the first video about strategy. And what I am going to do is start off with basically the strategy I was going to try to use at the spring offensive. I was going to be playing Japan, and I had looked at version 3, and I had thought about, what's the most effective way to pull off what Japan wants to do. Now, I have a bias against going all the way into China. Every time I have tried to go all the way into China, or I've ever had anybody I played against try to go all the way into China, it just turns into an absolute grind fest for Japan, and they just lose way more than I think is worth it for going all the way into China. Now, I've heard other people say, "Oh man, I see them get wiped out all the time." I'm like, good for you. I have yet to see that. What I tend to get into is I get to the point where it's like, oh man, you know, I have the firepower, I have the air force, I can go in and take one more step into China and push them back even further and maybe get that one and so on and so forth. And but then I always end up taking way too heavy losses and I always end up regretting it. So when I looked at this, I kind of went, okay, well, what about taking just the coastal territories and then just holding them and just saying, all right, well, you can go, Japan or China can do whatever it wants on the interior. I'm just going to kind of take these coastal territories here. This one's a little iffy, Kwang Tung, and I'll explain why I was on the fence about taking that one. But and then just kind of create a defensive line here. So what I was going to do, basically with Japan, is one of those nations where you can actually have the ability to kind of have a good idea of what you want to build, for the first couple turns because you're building to your strategy and what you want to do, and the opponents may or may not have an idea of what that is. But so you can kind of predict. Germany's kind of the same way in version in this game anyway. Depending on what you want to do, you can actually plan out your exact builds for the first couple turns because you're probably not going to war right away. So basically, there are a couple things that I looked at with Japan and where I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to upgrade this factory here, so I'd be getting 2 tech dice a turn. I had a list of techs prioritized for what I wanted for Japan. Wartime economy, improved construction, improved factories, long-range aircraft, jet fighters, attack transport. And then, well, these last 2 were kind of dependent upon the circumstances on the board. But these were the one. Basically, this was the order I was going to try to roll for them in. You can probably even swap out wartime economy with improved construction. But unless you roll really bad, you'll probably get them both to the second level before you really go to war anyway. So, and then I even had some of my builds set up. Now, when I was doing my builds, there were kind of 2 things that I was thinking of. One was, how much units and what exactly kind of units do I need to take these coastal territories, basically in two waves. The goal was I do an amphibious landing in one turn when I decide to pull the trigger. I do an amphibious landing here, 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 and then I go from Reihei into Sichuan. And then what that allows me to do is cut off Nanking and Peking, so those cities are surrounded because now I'm going to have pretty much the entirety of my fleet here blocking the ports, and neither one of them has a working airfield or anything like that. So they would be surrounded, and they would get the -1 on the next turn, assuming that there aren't enough forces back here to be able to counterattack and open up one of these territories. So with that in mind, basically every turn I had to build as many Marines as I could do, because oddly enough, Japan doesn't start off with a single Marine unit. So, turn 1, I was going to upgrade the medium factory. I was going to build 1 Marine, build a mountain right here in Reihei, and what was the other thing? Oh, and I was going to start, while I was doing that, they start off with a militia on a lot of these islands out here, just a single militia, and I was going to start upgrading those militia into infantry, and there's a very specific reason for that. which I'll go into in a bit. But back to China, I was going to basically consolidate my forces here, and I was going to figure out how much lift I had, and basically by turn 3 or 4, you should be getting ready. I was going to be ready to hopefully depend on going into these and taking these 4 territories. Then on the following turn, finish up by taking Nanking and Peking with another wave of guys coming over, and then just a little bit of light support coming into these 2 territories, because I don't want to leave these open and undefended for them to take back. Now, that was it. That's all I was planning on taking, was these 6 coastal territories. Now, there's a reason I picked those 6, and I chose not to go after Kwangtung, because the KMT, basically, this becomes their build-up point, because this is where the road opens, this is where they're going to get Lend-Lease, this is where they're going to start building artillery. I wanted to be in a position where he has to when he decides to come after me, he has to spend a turn moving forward to come after me by either moving his guys here or moving his guys here, or, whatever. Same thing with the communists. They have to spend a turn to, now they can build up right here, but these guys can't. But for KMT to reach me, they have to spend 2 turns. So I put a little more defense here. And basically, the defenses that I put here, the turn after I take these territories, I want to basically spend 8 IPP and go militia, 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 militia. And the turn after that, or in future, I want to do the same thing: militia, 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 militia. And that's just cheap soak-off. Just like going into China, you have to face those militia. And I don't know whether I mentioned this before in one of my videos, but when you go into China, the problem is, oh yeah, I did mention it in my video about it's never just militia, where, sure, it's just 2 infantry and 4 militia. That ain't that bad. But then when the infantry get 2 or 3 turns to roll because the militia are soaking up your hits, that's where you start to take damage turn after turn after turn. I basically want them to have to suffer through the same thing. So I'm going to put a couple militia in each space to eat up those first initial hits that they get. And then that leaves whatever I put here in Nanking or Peking to kind of counterattack. But wherever these guys are going to go, I'm going to see it coming. So if he actually moves up here to Kwangtung, I can bring in my fleet, bring in all my aircraft, bring in my Marines, and just, hopefully knock that out, take Kwangtung, and then fall back to Hunan. And maybe leave a cursory defense force there. That's why I don't take Kwangtung initially, because I don't want him to just build up, and then actually hit me hard enough in Kwangtung where he takes out a good portion of my units in China, and then all of a sudden he's sitting right on the areas that I actually want to keep and defend. So even though Kwangtung is worth 2, and it is worth a bonus, it's worth another bonus 1 or 2, I can't remember exactly what it is, I chose to leave it alone so that I can see these guys coming, no matter which direction they come from. A little more difficult with KMT, or sorry, CCP, but they also generally aren't going to have quite as big an economy either, unless they rolled really well and maybe got this early on in the game, and then got out to here with their rolls and connected up with Russia, which actually did happen in my playtest. So it was kind of a worst case scenario in my playtest, and everything still went pretty well. So basically, and then what I want to do is I want to build a minor factory here, just 1 minor factory, just so when I want to, I can build another infantry or artillery here just for the counterattack. Just so I can build units, and then I've already got the factory here in Rehe, so I can build units and then just put them wherever I feel I need them, or hold them back here for a counterattack. But I don't really plan on holding this with more than, 2 or 3 militia and maybe 1 or 2 infantry, depending on how quickly these guys are building up. You're going to have to make a judgment call. And then, like I said, I'm just going to have some soak-off for the militia sitting there in all those territories, just to kind of, have them do the same thing to them. And because the only interior territories that are worth it at that point is Senshi, which is only a 2, which isn't bad to take out. I mean, you could probably look at taking that one out if the CCP gets really weak, because the KMT still has to move 2 to get here, but then you might have to stage your counterattack guys up farther. Furthermore, you've got Yunnan, which is always a good idea to take out if you can. But again, that's where the KMT is going to usually fall back to and just put stacks and stacks and stacks of guys. And Kwangtung would be nice, but I don't want to stick my neck out too far. I want him to have to make the first move so that I can react to it and bring in all my firepower without going too far into China and really getting my rear end handed to me on those grindy combat rolls. So basically, take the coastal territory, reinforce it with militia, build a factory here to be able to build right onto the mainland and keep this under control and just get this economy. So that's basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and I think there's a 12th point in one of these. I don't have that chart right in front of me. So, and here's number 11. So that's 11 even without any bonuses, because you're going to take Henin down here as well. So I was going to basically take the low-hanging fruit and just defend and defend in a way that's advantageous to me, and put him into the uncomfortable position of having to do the risky attack rolls. And then I was just basically going to just build up Japan like normal, and set them up to come and start taking the money islands down here. Now, the reason I was going to go ahead and start and upgrade all these guys to infantry is I wanted threat projection and options to move more people this way. You already have the militia. If you look at it, it's already on the board. You didn't pay anything for it. So it's like getting an infantry for 2 IPP is one way to look at it. Militia obviously can't move unless it's in the home country. But I wanted to be able to have an extra guy, infantry, on all these islands that have militia, so that when I decide to come down here, I basically each one of those islands was going to have a destroyer next to it, or a transport, depending on how it all kind of panned out. And so when I finally went to war, I would go ahead and go and start counting out, and basically I would get, from the Caroline Islands with a single destroyer, you go 1, 2, 3. You can reach New Zealand. Now, New Zealand only starts off, I'm pretty sure, with 1 or 2 militia. So you would probably want to back that up with more stuff. But from right here, you can come and take New Zealand, no problem. So that's what those extra infantry out here were for amphibious invasions. And Solomon's is actually worth $1. I was also going to come out and try and take a lot of these exterior islands, to deny the British, the French, and then eventually the Americans the ability to come out and start using these ports, at least right away. They would have to at least waste their time, come and take the island back. Then they could, use it from there, which is, kind of what the original Japanese strategy was, is make them fight for every single island and bleed for every single island, and they'll lose their will to fight, which, of course, was a complete miscalculation on their part in the real world. But here I just want to kind of slow them down, make them have to fight, make them have to roll, hopefully wear away their infantry so they can't project their threat deep into what I've already taken, buy myself a turn or two of being able to build up to deal with them. After that, it was kind of a little up in the air. You can only plan so far ahead so quickly. I was planning, once I get the money islands and some of those islands out there, I really... as Japan, in the past that I've played Japan with a buddy of mine, I've almost always used my sneak attack to take out British Malaya. It starts with a fortress. They usually reinforce it just more and more, and it's a tough nut to crack. So I usually use my sneak attack to take that out, and then I just kind of roll up right up to here and start really threatening Calcutta. Of course, that's a whole nother video unto itself about where and how to use the sneak attack to the best effect. But the truth is, that's one of those things you're just going to have to look at the board and make that decision yourself. Those were just those couple games I played with him. I did the math and I just felt that was the biggest thing, because once I took that out of the picture, it just opened all this up to me. I obviously still had the Americans to worry about, and things like that. Anzac was still, can always be a threat if you don't knock them back to Australia quickly. But that was generally my strategy. And the core of it was not investing. I didn't want to invest too much resources into China and get stuck in there and just be throwing IPPs to take away these worthless territories. Until opportunity presented itself, where they made some bad attacks or attacks that just didn't work out well, and then I was in a position to counterattack from a place of strength. Now, of course, anytime you're talking about strategy, and I probably should have started the video with this, is it's always, if you adhere to a strategy and fail to take into account the board itself and the board state, that's on you. You can complain, oh, the strategy didn't work. It's like, well, yeah, it didn't work because you didn't look at the board. You should have shifted. You needed to shift what you were doing because of how things worked out. One problem with this strategy is, one thing I have to take into account is, what if the KMT player decides to put all his units up here on the coast? Well, I'm going to have to wait a few more turns to get some more guys to be able to physically land them, because those fights can suddenly become a lot harder. On the other hand, if he pulls back all his units and then gives them to me, well, I can go in a little earlier, but then I'm stuck having to put more and more units here to defend because he's got more effective units back here. So you have to make judgment calls, no matter what your strategy is, about what and how you're going to do certain things. You can never just follow a strategy blindly. You've got to be able to look at the map and assess what's going on. And of course, there's always the issue of, if all my Marines die on those initial landings, well, that can slow down coming down here, because I've got to continue to build Marines every turn. And to be honest, Japan is probably going to build 2 Marines every turn for most of the game. Really, when you think about it, unless you get really lucky and all your initial Marines keep surviving. Now, and with Japan, I do want to say one thing about the Special Naval Landing Force units. I think they are way too expensive for what they do. Way too expensive for what they do. 5 IPP for a 3-5 Marine. In my opinion, Marines exist for one reason and one reason only in this game, and that is to absorb the double hits. That's it. I don't care whether they live or die. I don't care whether they score a hit or not. They're there to absorb those double hits. If they survive and get a hit, great. That's just icing on the cake. But I never expect Marines to survive. They're just there to absorb those double hits. And to start spending that extra IPP on every Marine, it just is. I just don't think Japan has the wiggle room for that. If you really get into a naval landing where you think you need stats to back it up to get those hits, then you need to send in more air power. That's what you need to do, or you need to load up your shore bombardments and things like that to be able to get in there. But I would never rely on the actual infantry or Marines to get the hits, because their attack values are just so low. And then if you actually start losing the Special Naval Marines, that's just more money down the drain. So I don't particularly care for them. Now, later in the game, you might need to build some. You might find yourself in a spot, because you can only build 2 Marines a turn, but then you can build 2 Marines and then 2 Special Naval Landing Forces. So if you're in a position where you need Marine-style units right away, then that's certainly an option. But early on, when you need to be, I think, frugal with Japan, I would not build them. I would save them for later in the game, for just what I said. When you need extra Marines, you need to put out 4 Marines a turn, and you're willing to pay premium dollars for that, then go ahead with the SNLF. So that was the basic strategy. From there, I was going to look at some other things about, I definitely wanted to try and bring Japan from here over to take Iran and take Aden, to deny the British the +2 for that, and I think it's FEC gets +2 for that, if I remember correctly. If the Italian player wasn't able to do that, but that's one thing. Even if I found myself in a position where, okay, I can't take Calcutta this turn, Well, okay, then let's come up to southern Iran. Southern Iran is actually worth two, and you're taking two away from Britain. That's good. Aden, you start to take this away from them. It's not worth anything, but it's part of their bonus. And then from there, you're actually threatening the Africa, which may or may not be an option. Now, obviously, at some point, you're probably going to want to go for Calcutta because that's how you knock out you really take FEC out of the war. But that was the long term goal, was to look at all those bonuses and try and deny them whatever I'm able to, not just take for my own gain, but look for cost efficient trades. Like Iran is a good one because not only are you getting two IPP, possibly three once you get into Azerbaijan, but then you're denying the money that Britain itself was getting, and you're helping out Germany all that and Italy all that much better. And then you know, if you look at it that way. And of course, with Australia, you always want to try and keep some of your fleet within two spaces and strong enough that the Australian fleet can't come up and take you out, to deny them their IPP bonus for that. So I always try to look for that, look for those trade offs like that. What is not only can I gain money myself, but can I gain money for myself while I'm taking money away from you at the same time? So that's the general strategy for Japan that I was going to pull off. And I think with the upcoming expansion, it will be a lot more difficult to, because I think China in general is going to become a much bigger powder keg if you're playing with that expansion. And I have a feeling most people will, because it makes China way more interesting. In some ways, China becomes like Spain, and you've got to start asking yourself, how much resources as the allies am I going to put into it to really harass Japan? Or because, with Spain, you can throw money away if you're not careful. If the dice roll bad or some of the random events go good, things start going well for Russia, well, suddenly Germany and Italy need to ask themselves, man, do we need to it's two victory points. Do we need to keep pumping money into this? Or do we need to maybe cut our losses and get out of there? And Russia's kind of in the same boat. If they get lucky, do they keep on putting money and really have a chance of winning it, or do they go ahead and pull back and say, okay, I've stymied them enough over there. Let's pull back and conserve my money so that I'm ready for the actual war. I think China is going to fall into that same category because Russia has options for giving them money and resources, and the Allies have more options for giving them money and resources. So it's going to be more interesting, in how it plays out. And again, like I said, with this strategy was built before that expansion would come out. So maybe it won't be as viable this turn. Maybe in the future it's just more likely. You know what? You just got to fight it. It's just not going to be effective to just take the coastal territories and sit on them and then let China kind of rot. So that was the general attitude or the general idea of what I was going for. If you disagree with me or see any major flaws that maybe I had kind of overlooked, please say something in the comments so we can kind of readdress this and get a good dialogue going about what other options China or Japan has for China, and or this area down here. So with that said, this is Wintermute, and I'm signing off from the Think Tank.